Hi everyone, this is Sharon Arpana. I'm very glad to be back with you. I first of all want to thank you for your comments. I appreciate the kind comments and especially your agreeing with the word. I just commend you for that because as we receive the word into our life by faith, it can grow. In Isaiah 55:11, God has promised that his word shall not return to him void, but it shall accomplish what he sends it for and shall prosper in that thing. So I really believe that as you receive the word by faith, it's going to bear fruit in your life. That's what basically prospering is, to be fruitful. Last time I had shared one of my favorite verses, certainly the verse that has changed my life, Hebrews 11:11. I love the last part. She judged him faithful who had promised. I often think that if the Lord tarries and I have to go home, I would like that written as my epitaph. She judged him faithful who had promised. I want my life really to be about that, judging God faithful. So this morning the Lord gave me the picture of a judge. Like Sarah judged God faithful, you and I are in the position of a judge to see if God is faithful or not. It's a bench trial where the defendant has elected to have a non-jury trial. It's just them going before the judge, and the judge then examines the evidence and then reaches a verdict. So the evidence that the judge has to examine should be credible, it should be believable. And the judge has to be convinced one way or the other whether the defendant is guilty or innocent. So this was the picture I got, that we are the judge. God is the defendant, the devil is the prosecutor, and Jesus is the defense attorney. So the prosecutor, the devil, is just making accusations against God and telling you, the judge, God is not faithful. Look at what happened to you when you were young. Look at your financial situation. You are not well. God is not faithful. You're not married after all these years. You've been crying out to the Lord. You're not married. Or he can say, look at your children. You've been praying for them for so long. Nothing's happened. In fact, they've just gone from bad to worse. And he can just keep on leveling charges against God. He says, oh, look at the evil in the world. Do you think a good God would allow that evil? He is called the accuser. He's called the accuser of the brethren. But in this picture, in this analogy, he's accusing God of wrongdoing and saying God is not faithful. He's accusing God's character. And you're still sitting in the position of the judge. You're listening to the prosecutor. Then it's the turn of the defense attorney to speak. And as I said, that is Jesus. Jesus, when he starts speaking, he could tell you about the faithfulness of God in creation. God created the heavens and the earth. And ever since creation, there has never been a day where the sun hasn't risen. You may not see it, but the sun has risen. And in Lamentations 3:23, we are told that his mercies are new every morning and great is God's faithfulness. So Jesus could talk about this. He could talk about the history of Israel. He chose Abraham and out of that made one nation through whom the Messiah was going to come. That's the whole purpose of this nation that he chose, because as he tells Abraham in Genesis 12, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And later on in Galatians 3, Paul uses this same verse to show how the gospel was preached in advance to Abraham. Jesus, when he speaks, could talk about your personal history. Jesus could talk about the faithfulness of God in your life, the many things that he has brought you out of. Yes, you have been through trials. There was never a clause that said there'll be no trials. On the contrary, Jesus has promised trials. He says, in this world you will have trials, but do not be afraid, for I have overcome the world. So Jesus could talk about all these things. But instead, Jesus only brings before you, the judge, his own blood. We're told in Hebrews 12 verse 24 that the blood of Jesus speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Why the blood of Abel? Abel was the first human being in history to die. Adam died before spiritually, but Abel's death was the first death in human history, and it was not a death by natural causes. He was murdered. It was the first bloodshed in history. And in Genesis 4:10, the Lord tells Cain, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out from the ground to me. So if God can hear the blood of Abel, which is crying out for justice, will he not also Listen to the cry of his own son's blood, which is crying out for mercy. Jesus' first words on the cross were, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's because of the blood of Jesus that we can be forgiven and have this right standing. Romans 5 verse 8 says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. So the blood of Jesus is speaking a better word than the blood of Abel. And Jesus stands there before you, the judge, and says, my blood has paid for it all, including your view of God. You have to make a decision. Is God faithful or is he not? Are you going to believe the word of Jesus and the blood of Jesus, or are you going to listen to the lies of the prosecutor, the devil, the adversary, the accuser, who's saying God is not faithful? It is my hope and my prayer that all those who watch this video, whenever you watch it, that you will judge God faithful. I want to read a passage that speaks about God's promise and his faithfulness. One of my favorite passages, certainly in the book of Hebrews, which is one of my favorite books, and it is Hebrews chapter 6. I'm going to read from verse 11. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence in the full assurance of hope until the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. For when God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you. And so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise, he meaning Abraham. For men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute. Thus God, determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by two immutable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, that we might have strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having become high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. God is faithful. Trust him. Believe in him, so that it will be said of you like it was said of Sarah, that you judged him faithful who had promised. God bless you.